What we've got here is failure to communicate.
From sunny Southern California, we bring you Meet Bridget, a podcast for building confident communication and female badassery. We spotlight women who have bridged the gaps in their lives by building strong relationships and speaking their teenage dreams into reality.
And recurring themes is always relationships. So we've kind of spent some time compiling frequently asked questions, and I think today will just be like a fun, relaxed way to provide our 2 cents on what communication is like in different relationship settings.
Hi, welcome back. This is Asha and Keshiia. If you are new to the show, we are best friends and we work together on a platform for teen girls focused on developing confidence and communication, and that's called Bridget. This is our show, Meet Bridget, and today we are going to do a slightly different kind of episode. We wanted to have more of a relaxed conversational episode together, talking about a few topics that our listeners have requested from us. So, hi, Keish, how are you doing?
Hi, Ashi. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the show again. I'm really excited to do this because we get so many questions, especially from our younger audience, about things that they'd like to hear us talk about. And recurring themes is always relationships. So we've kind of spent some time compiling frequently asked questions. And I think today will just be like a fun, relaxed way to provide our 2 cents on what communication is like in different relationship settings.
Yeah, I think that when we talk about relationships, we do groups into like personal relationships, like our friendships, romantic relationships, and then work relationships. And that when you put them in those categories, it does sound very, very distinct.
Mhm.
But I think the reality of life is that sometimes some of those things like cross over
Mhm.
and you have a friend that's a work friend, but also a personal friend, or you met someone that you fell in love with at, a work outing or something that life gets a little bit of more gray area. So we wanted to talk about any instances of that in our own lives and how we've kind of navigated that successfully or not. And then just some best practices that we've had when we establish relationships in all those categories. So I feel like one really obvious one is that like Kashia and I are best friends. Really, I think of her as like a sister. And we also work together on Bridget. We've been working together on Bridget forever. And
Mhm.
we definitely have developed different things, kind of unspoken ways of like, okay, are we in Bridget mode or are we in like friend mode? And sometimes it's crossed over, not as distinct as that. But
Yeah.
I think it'd be fun to talk about just like our relationship and how we've been able to work together on something more professional, but then also really like have a flourishing personal friendship as well.
I completely agree. I think this is, well, I'd like to say that we're unique to the world because,
Because we're
you
millennials and that's
yes. But I think in a way we are, and but it's not magic. I think it takes work, and it takes a lot of the skills that we try to impart to the young girls that we've worked with over the years to make this relationship successful on both ends. So as a little background, Asha founded Bridget, I want to say 6 years ago, 7 years ago now, Asha. Yeah, and we were friends at the time, but our friendship really grew so much closer actually through working together on Bridget and just, the constant connecting with each other and putting ideas down on paper and then bringing them to life. I think that's where we really figured out that our hearts were so aligned and we naturally became best friends from that. But I ended up reaching out to Asha, having seen her put something on her Instagram bio, I think. And at the time, it was called Bridget Foundation because Bridget started out as a nonprofit. And for me, that was a big jump because Asha, if you haven't seen her in real life, is beautiful and glowing and just exudes this confidence that now I know is, something she hones and works on every day. A lot of it's natural, but it took me taking a step and just getting over my own insecurities to be like, "Oh, I really wanna learn about what this is. It sounds like something I'd like to be a part of." I feel like when I first looked at the landing page for Bridget, I knew it was going to be something tailored to young girls, which is a passion of mine, education. I'm an older sister. So I was just really interested in seeking out what she was working on, and that's how our friendship and relationship began.
This is so funny to like hear because and it just goes to show you how sometimes like our perception of ourselves and other people's perceptions of us can be so different because I remember a lot of in those early days, I was just like, okay, I'm desperate to start something. My heart is pulling me towards this direction. But, I had never started a company before or a nonprofit. And I was really just like, putting something out there and hoping, I felt like I was throwing spaghetti at a wall. So I vividly remember putting together this like website. It was the first website I ever built. And I was going to like use it as my vision board and just put it out there. So to me, I was like, I think it was like Christmas break because it was the only time I had with my like job to really like sit down and like think about this with a clear mind. And then to be reached out by Kashia, who I knew and respected, but weren't super, super close friends at that stage. We were just started to get to know each other. I was like, oh my gosh, a real woman wants to get involved with this thing. I'm like, to me, that made it real, and it was something at that point, like I was really just kind of doing on my own and like just trying to come up with ideas and get it going. And to me, that was such a gesture of faith in my vision. And it was so critical for me. So it's funny to hear Kashia's take on it, that it was like a leap of faith for her because it was very much a leap of faith for me. And reaching out to me was so pivotal in really
Mhm.
having this thing to have more momentum. So, and it's been that way at points throughout this whole throughout the years afterwards. There have been several
Mhm.
moments where her presence and persistence and like calm faith in what we're doing has kept it going. So that's kind of like the start of like, a friendship that was also blossoming out of something professional. I think that it's much easier to form friends in a way when your work is tied to something you're passionate about. Like I've had friends in work settings where I was just working at something really difficult or, that I was interested in, but maybe not like it wasn't my heart in that work. And I think it's a lot easier to have this kind of friendship come out of something that was like such deep passion.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think I remember Rachel Pally talking about this in her interview with us as well in season 1. She had a very, very close friend that she worked with for years. And I think I remember her saying, like, toward the start of the pandemic, they had to shift, and it was a big deal not having her right hand person there. So some of these work slash friendship relationships, they really bleed into each other. And again, like her vision is very much aligned with something that she's passionate about and believes in. And I think those types of, when you're working in that environment, like you said, it's a lot easier to continue to stay aligned. I do want to kind of bring it back though, because one of the things that this brings up for me is like curating the right friendships, not that like you're angling to make specific types of friendships, if you will. Like, I think friendships have to be organic, but I think part of having a successful friendship is like revisiting, who you'd like to be around. And I think for me, I've been very deliberate in spending time with people that I really admire. And you're the perfect example of that. You're probably one of the peak examples of that, where you look for friends that not only share some of the same values, it doesn't have to be completely aligned. I mean, you don't want cookie cutter friendships where you're just agreeing with people all the time, but friends who, exude a similar type of respectfulness, sense of humor, like have life values that align with yours. And I think this is a prime example of it. And so when you start to fall into these friendships and work on developing them, one of the things is maintaining respect, which I think, maybe we could talk about
Yeah.
boundaries a little bit here.
Yeah,
Like,
and I think you make a really good point. Like part of curating that circle of friends, like I think a lot of people have probably heard this at this point, where it's like you are the sum of the five people that you spend the most time with, which sounds intense, but really is just like, surround yourself with people who there are attributes that you admire about them that you want to become more like in a lot of
mhm.
ways. That involves sometimes cutting out some potential friendships or saying no to spending time with people who you're like, well, I like them, like we get along, but this and this and this that the way I feel or like, certain groups of friends where I'm like, gosh, I feel like every time we hang out, it's just gossip. Like it's just gossip. And really
Yeah.
like I don't want to be a gossiper, but when I find myself in these circles, I don't know what else to do. And I want to relate to them.
Mhm.
So I do at least listen to the gossip, and that makes me feel icky. So I've had to kind of like curate
Yeah.
that or limit it, not even be like, I'm gonna be friends with those people, but be like, okay, like I'm gonna spend time with them, but they're not gonna be my closest friends where I'm like, I'm questioning if I'm having a crisis with Ashia. Like I've had life crises, before, and I'm like, "I don't know what
Yeah.
to do about way," and I can be really vulnerable where, like, there are some friendships where I'm like, "That's not the person to go crying to." Like, they're great,
Right,
we can have fun
right.
together, but they're not the person I'm gonna go crying to.
You also never wanna feel like the things that you share with somebody, like the most vulnerable things or things that are going to be, farmed out to other
Yeah.
friend groups as like something
Yeah,
to
just
talk
like
about
comfort
because
daughter.
those are moments
Yeah,
exactly, those are those are moments of developing
yeah.
trust.
Have you ever
Yeah.
had to, like, end a friendship?
Yeah, I have. I've had a few incidences. One is a friendship that we just took a long hiatus, and the other was a friendship that you just kind of naturally grew apart. And I think this happens over time. It's not personal at all, but life gets really busy, especially in the last 2 years. I think a lot of people can relate to this. Like everyone's circle has gotten intensely smaller just by the nature of the pandemic and by the nature of people being, isolated and feeling more isolated. I think, if I look at the last 10 years, I've had a situation where a friend was talking badly about me to somebody close to her and it kind of came out and came around. And basically, I had a friend who really wanted to spend a lot of time with me, and I love spending time with her, but her personality was a little bit more reclusive than mine was, and I think when I would try to bring her out into different friend groups so that, we could all participate together and hopefully new friendships would be made and stuff, she was not the type of person that was outgoing. How would I say this, Osh? She wasn't proactive about making friendships because she was so
Mhm.
shy, and I am the type of person that will naturally go out and start conversations, even if I feel really
Yeah,
uncomfortable, just because I know that that's the only way it's going to happen. And 9 times out of 10, I feel really, really uncomfortable. I am a
yeah,
naturally shy person, but I think because of that, I've learned, okay, I have to put myself out there if I'm interested in making new friends. And it falls in line with my mantra of like, I would like to surround myself with people that I admire who have some characters I'd like to emulate and who have other characteristics who are quite different from mine that I'd like to learn
yeah,
from. Not everyone thinks like that. So, she got her feelings really hurt because she felt like I wasn't giving her enough attention in this public setting. And perhaps, it's hard. That part's subjective. Like maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. But then from that, a lot of other things came out like, well, I talked to this person and they said that you're really stuck up. And I'm like, well, I don't know that
yeah,
person. So I feel like that's a really unfair judgment. And that was really hard for me because I consider this person to be somebody that I was really close to, but I really struggled with feeling like, well, if they're talking to this person about me that I don't know, this is probably not a singular event. And I felt very uncomfortable with that. So I did have to say, she apologized. We had a lot of talks about it, but I just said, I feel a little bit differently about this friendship now than I did previously. And I just love you and respect you, but need to take a step back. And that was really
yeah.
hard.
Well, what I feel like I can totally relate to this. I think that I mean, you mentioned that you are naturally kind of a more introverted person. You've done a lot of work to be like, "Okay, this is how I overcome that, and I go into a setting, and I'm gonna talk to people, I'm gonna reach out." So it's like this is kind of a battle that you've already faced personally, and it's like it is tempting sometimes when we make a friend and we realize like, "Oh, like they're working on this thing that I had to work on," and then you wanna help them through it, you know? But I think that when you're attempting to do that, if that person isn't responsive to, like, your efforts to help them, you have to draw a boundary somewhere where it's like, "Okay, well, I wanna help you, but if you're not receptive to my efforts to help, and you're trying to pull me back to the place that you're in, like, that's not productive for either of us, you know? Like, I had a
Yeah.
friend in college, and while I was in college, I was really, struggling with a lot of, like, body insecurity and, but was finding productive ways to pull myself out of insecurity or feeling really negative and was working through that. And I had a friend who approached me, and she was going through some of the same things, but she was really still in a very, very negative place and would come to me with, like, I remember she, like, came into my room one time and asked me, like, "Do you know any way to, like, quickly lose this weight or something?" And I was like, "A, no. B, I'm trying to get away from that kind of, like, mindset and behavior and really think of, like, healthy ways to live my life." And I was like there were just repeat occurrences like this where I just had to hit a point, I'm like, I feel like this person is pulling me back to things I've really worked hard to get away from personally, and I
Mhm.
can't. I invested some time really trying to, like, help her, make her feel better, or comfort her, and then I hit a point where I was just like, "If I do any more of this, I'm moving backwards."
Yeah, which I think brings up a really good, like, this is kind of like step 1, setting boundaries with people that you're close to in friendships. Like, it takes a lot. We're not saying this is easy, but I think when you hit these moments of conflict, like, one, they hit you first. Like, I think internally you feel like something shifted, doesn't feel right. You're like, okay, there's something that I need to address. And I think there's probably multiple types of people, but there are those who are not as afraid of conflict that will just say rapid fire, like, this doesn't feel right. Like, stop, let's talk about this. And then there's the other camp that internalizes that and holds on to it and, might be thinking, do I want to bring this up? Do I not want to bring it up? Is it going to be uncomfortable? But either way, I think the first step is really acknowledging that there's that shift in comfort levels and getting to the space of being like, okay, how do I want to deal with this? And I think this is where the
Mhm.
communication skills that we teach really come in handy because you can write it down on paper or you can journal about it or be like, this is why it makes me feel uncomfortable. But then the next step is the actual confrontation, that critical conversation, if you
Mhm.
will.
Yeah, I think that you and I have discussed this before that it's like, okay, in order to set boundaries with someone else, really it comes back to our relationship with ourself. It just set boundaries for other people, you basically have to set some boundaries with, like, yourself and what you will and will not tolerate. This is making me think a lot of, like, our Bridget on confidence and also some modules, like,
Yes.
teaching that we've done on confidence, that it's really about, like, trusting yourself is what that means. So it's like, okay, we think of confidence as this very external thing that people are perceiving it, but really it's like it's a very internal relationship. But I again, as another experience, like, I've not had very many super close friendships that literally, like, ended. We grew apart from each
Yeah.
other, but there was one where something was misunderstood or said, and I remember I tried to reach out a few times towards the end and just like, "I just wanna gain some understanding on what happened here," and if there's a misunderstanding, maybe I can clear it up, even if that doesn't mean we're friends anymore. Like, I'd really like to just have some clarity. Maybe learn from
Mhm.
this if I really did do something wrong and there was 0 communication back, which is everyone's prerogative, like, no one is obligated to
Yeah.
communicate with anyone else, and I to this day, there's some mystery there about what happened with that friendship, but to me, I also a boundary that I've set with myself, I'm like, "Okay, communication is fundamental for me." Like, if I have a person in my life
Mhm.
who I trust and I'm close with, and I'm putting myself on the line and being like, "I wanna communicate with you. I wanna hear your perspective. I wanna learn from this." And if there's no communication back, for me, there's no relationship without communication. So that was a boundary, and I was like, "All right, I need to let go of this friendship because there's no line of communication anymore."
This actually brings up such a good point. There is a friendship that I have where this person reaches out to me sometimes for advice, and it's a situation where they're at a similar crux where they like are very passionate about trying to rekindle this relationship, but the other person has been very unresponsive. Every now and then the other person will kind of bite and be like, "Okay, this is how I feel," but then there's long periods without communication. And one of the things that I remember telling this person when they asked me what I thought about it, I've had personal experiences with this as well, is that you can't be a mind reader. You can't assume what the other person's thinking, experiencing, what they're going through, because there will be junctions in life where, like, if you put it in, like, if you slip on those shoes and you think of yourself being in that position, things happen, like tragedies happen, periods of time happen where you just don't have the bandwidth. You have to kind of really take a step back and think like, okay, have I had periods in my life where I can relate to being not available, completely absorbed by something else, whether it's personal, family, career wise, what have you? Have there been moments where, somebody could say I've dropped off the face of the planet because there's that radio silence? But in any of those cases, it's like nobody knows what's going on inside my head and vice versa. Like you can get to know somebody really well and understand what they may or may not be thinking. But ultimately, at the end of the day, with relationships and communication that's just at a standstill, like for me, like you can't try to mind read because you have no idea what the other person's going through. One. And two, I think it's just crazy making for
Yeah.
yourself because then you're spending a lot of time hyping without, And until you actually speak to that person, you just
And
know.
I think that that is staying in that place of like, I don't know is really hard for people. I think our brains are hardwired to have answers and solutions and to keep pursuing things that are important to us until we have answers to them. But I think that, like, okay, you can't, if you're not communicating with someone, you can't understand fully what's going on, but also, like, okay, if you're unable to get through, I'm just thinking of people. I mean, I feel like I hear about this all the time on other podcasts and stuff, but it's like, oh, like, say someone dumps you and you wanna know why, and you like, you wanna fix it or correct what they misunderstood or like,
Yeah.
and you're just holding on, but it's like at the point where someone has already kind of like, uh, made a decision about a relationship, it's like you're not gonna change their mind by trying to, like, badger them or get them to respond to you or this or that. It's like, okay, like,
Yeah.
sometimes relationships are gonna come in and out of our lives, and we won't always have, like, a "and this and this and this are why that relationship didn't work." It's not like our relationships with
Yes.
people aren't like science experiments that have, like, hypothesis, and this was a conclusion, and here's the evidence and facts, like, that's just not how our relationships are. So, I think that, I mean, particularly for that one friendship that I mentioned, it still is hard for me sometimes. I think about that friendship. I'm like, God, like, there are, like, great memories that come up, and I'm like, "I never figured out, like, what happened there," and it just, like, breaks my heart,
Yeah.
but, like, my brain wants to be like, "It was this. It was this," maybe
Yeah.
it was when I said this, and, like, maybe she took it the wrong way or whatever, and you can just literally drive yourself crazy, or I can just be like, "You know
Yeah.
what? She made a decision, and that's fine," and, and I don't have to harbor any negative feelings towards her, but I also don't have to harbor feelings about myself. I feel
You're
like I did everything
yeah.
I could try to make things right with her. I can keep moving forward and not have that guilt about that relationship for my life either. So I think that it's just, like, sitting in that place of, like, "Nope, don't know. I don't know what happened there," and that's fine. Like, I can leave it at that and still
Yeah.
live a life that is productive and
And full. I think too, I don't know, I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think people come in and out of our lives at different
Mhm.
times. Different relationships are stronger during different seasons for whatever reason. I know, I just rhymed. That was
And Kishia is
But,
now moving into a place in her life where she's gonna be a rapper.
yeah. But, I think you make a really good point, like, not only can you continue to have relationships fluctuate in the ways that they're close or not close at different times, you can continue to live a full life. Those relationships might pop back
Mhm.
up. I think that there's nothing wrong with having periods or stretches of time where maybe you grow apart a little bit because both parties are living life and experiencing new things and growing as individuals. And then, you guys come back together, you catch back up, you figure out where you're aligned or where you're not. Like, there are just friendships that sort of wax and wane like
Totally.
that.
And I think that, I mean, we talk about, like, social media and the impact of that too. I mean, there's obviously,
Mhm.
that gets a bad rap, like all the comparison and stuff that can happen, especially with young girls looking at social media. But when it comes to like social media and seeing the lives of people that you've interacted with in the past or people you interact with on a daily basis, I think there is kind of a benefit to having social media. Like, I'm thinking about a high school friend who we were literally like everyday best friends at that point, and then
Mhm.
we went off to college and we went to grad school and we got married and we both have kids now. And just recently she was in town and reached out and she was like, "Do you want to get lunch?" And it was so fun. We got lunch and we were talking about all these old memories and just our lives now and everything. And it was just that. And it's like, we went to lunch, and afterwards, it's not like, "Okay, we're gonna become best friends again." It was just like, "No, we haven't really talked to each other since," but it was really enjoyable to just be like,
Yeah.
"Wow, we were really impactful in each other's lives at that time," and it's fun to still see, like, I've been able to see pictures of her baby on Instagram, and it's fun for me, but even though I don't need to keep, like, a everyday relationship with her, I can still, like,
Yeah.
that adds fullness, to life, even though this isn't like every friend of mine doesn't need to be like a everyday best friend. I think there's different, like, levels
Yeah.
of friendship and interaction for different friendships.
I think there's something really joyous too about just appreciating every single person in your life and the experiences that you've gone through and removing the pressure of they need to write me every day or I need to write them every day or I need to comment on this picture or did they reshare this when I tagged them kind of thing because life happens at such an extraordinary speed online right now that I think it's really unfair to have the expectation that one person is able to keep up with every relationship that they have.
Mhm.
I think, especially like you make such a great point about social media. a lot of us have like hundreds, thousands of friends on social media. Like, it is physically
Yeah.
impossible and it would be extraordinarily unhealthy to expect
Even to have,
yourself
like,
or another
50
person.
good close friends,
Yeah.
honestly, like, that's a lot.
It's just
Yeah,
impossible. Like, we have a fairly big group of friends that I would consider, like, my good friends, and I generally know, like, what's going on in their lives, at any given time. But I think the beauty of these friendships and why they work on such a mature level is that nobody has the expectation, outside of, like, being respectful, of course. Like, if somebody reaches out to you directly, like, I'm not saying don't
yeah,
respond, but, like, we get it, like, life
yeah,
gets busy, everybody has jobs, families, like, there's a natural flow and order to
yeah,
things that I think just removing that pressure off of yourself and just saying, like, "I have to maintain and, make sure I'm
yeah,
healthy," make sure, like, if you have a significant other, that that relationship's really healthy, like, your immediate family, and then you start kind of, like, branching out from
yeah.
there. But, like, don't put so much pressure on your like, if Asha's busy, like, or if I don't hear from her for, like, 24, 48 hours, like, it's probably because she has a newborn and a toddler
Yeah,
and a
no, and I think
job.
that that's really liberating for friendships. I think a lot of our girls ask about, like, the transitions between, like, high school and then college, and then after college, and, like, how do friends change through then? Like, how do you make new friends? And I think one of the things that I've observed about my lasting friendships, like friendships that have carried through life phases, is just that level of, like, trust and respect where I feel like when I think back to, like, high school relationships, what was different was like, "Oh my god, she didn't answer my call," or, "She didn't sit with me at lunch today.
Yes.
Our friendship is over. Oh my did she hear is there a rumor going about Matt?" Like, everything is, like, such high stakes and, like, okay, if one thing happens or we don't get ready for this dance together, then, like, we're not friends anymore. That these as you kinda transition into more adult relationships, it's like there's an understanding with your friends that you really trust and respect that it's like, you have life
Yes.
going on. You have likely a career, it's some romantic relationships, maybe kids and family things going on. You have other friends, you have big events in your life. Like we don't live in the same place. Like a lot of big
Yeah.
boundaries start actually there's boundaries we create with our friends, but there's
Yeah.
also boundaries that like are life boundaries that keep us from being able to really actively invest in our friendships. And I feel like the time that you do dedicate to fostering friendships as we get older, like when I have a friend reach out to me and ask to go to lunch with me or, to even have a 30-minute phone call if we live in different places or something, I'm like,
Mhm.
they're taking time, which I know is valuable to foster a relationship with me. And I respect that, and I appreciate it. And I think that vice versa, we respect each other's time, but we also
Mhm.
trust that there's like stuff happens. Like, it's so liberating to
Yeah.
like, 'cause she had texted me, "We've been trying to find time to do this because I have a newborn that's, breastfeeding every 2.5 hours." The freedom that she's given me, she's like, "Don't worry about it. Like, if something comes up, we can change it. Like, I know you have your hands full." And I'm like, "She sees me," you know?
But
Liberating.
vice versa too. It's like you're equally as graceful where it's like, "Okay, I need 2 minutes because I've been working on this email since 8 AM and it's now
Yeah.
1 and it hasn't gone out."
Yeah, like, life happens, and it's like, these are all like, I love my closest friends for all these other things that they're doing, and it
Yeah.
makes me respect them and admire them even more.
And I think you made like, okay, so this is like my favorite thing is like bringing this all back full circle, like confidence, like trusting in yourself first to make the right decisions, but also having confidence in your friendships. I think, well, in any relationship, really, having confidence in one, the fact that you can present yourself as you are. I think that is the first part of a recipe for a good friendship. Like, any friendship, any relationship that's built on false pretenses, I don't believe it's going to ever work out because eventually like the cracks will start to come out and things will crumble. But if you show up with confidence in who you are and what you bring to the table, like that's step 1 for a great relationship of any kind. And then, like you said, like having confidence, being able to trust that the relationships and bonds we build with people aren't going to shatter just because, sorry, I can't get back to you for 48 hours. And, being able to establish that is also something that you have to work on, just like you work on being confident in yourself, like you work on being confident in your friendships. And I think that's how those relationships ultimately
Yeah.
flourish.
Yeah, because it's like you feel when a friend has faith in you. Like if I say, I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you, I've literally been like so underslept, you know? And if like I get the response like, it's okay, you know, or like, oh, you let me know we talked about this. We knew it was gonna be fine. Or whatever it is, or like I failed in this way, or I need you, or whatever it is, like when you get that, you can feel when a friend trusts you, you know, and has faith friendship
Mhm.
beyond what little hiccups happen in life on either end. Like you feel that in a deeper level.
And I think that requires honest communication. Like, I think there's a level of vulnerability that you have to offer where, and I'm not saying like, okay, you have to tell this person, oh my God, today I'm on my period. And it was like, real,
But we
no,
do that
there's,
sometimes.
yeah, we do that. But like, in applying this, not just to friendships, but like work
Mhm,
relationships as well, or, work, professional friendships, romantic relationships, like, we're not saying be so vulnerable that you don't have anything left in your own tank.
mhm,
Like, it's up to you how much you want to share or not share. But I do think, and I think you feel the same way, regardless of the level of what you're sharing, I just think it has to be
mhm.
honest. And as long as you're honest and open and transparent, and you're not trying to like re-angle, like, how do I say this so I'm not hurting their feelings? Well, the first step is like, okay, this is the information as it's true. And then you go from there.
Yeah, I think that was I think, like, I feel like this is a great little transition into kinda, like, work relationships, but I think one big learning that I had through multiple different jobs was I used to think that the way that you build respect is to achieve
Mhm.
everything flawlessly, you know, and to overachieve and to do more than what people think you can do, and what I experienced from attempting to do that is not only you fail at trying to do everything perfectly and on your own, but then you also, like, in trying to do things that way, people aren't clear on what you're needing or your capabilities or how you're feeling. Then they also it's almost like
Yeah.
overpromising and underdelivering, and you actually end up losing respect that way by being kind of a recluse. But I feel like ways that I've gained professional respect is when I've been able to be like, "Listen, like, I am
Yeah.
slammed right now," or, "I am having the biggest problem, like, trying to crack this nut and solve this issue or get my head around something, like, can you help me? Or like, I wanna get on that project with you, but like, I gotta start it next week because I really am my attention is on this thing right now. And being open like that, or you work on a group project and something goes wrong and it was my fault. And it's like, listen, I take full
Mhm.
responsibility for this. Or someone I hired made a mistake and it's like, that is on me because I should have showed them how to do this. Like taking responsibility, but also being honest, you know, especially in the workplace, it doesn't make you look it
Yeah,
makes you look
having
trustworthy.
accountability goes a long way.
Yes, because people are not perfect. There's no way to do any job
Yes.
flawlessly. It's just not. Even like the best surgeons, the best doctors, like people are human, you know? We have flaws and that's actually our flaws are gifts in a way because
When you were
people
telling this story, I was just thinking about how well I relate to this because I think we're both natural born people pleasers.
yes, 100%.
A lot of people are. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah,
it. I think people pleasers are naturally givers. They want
or
to,
like service industries
be
all the
of
time.
service. Yes. And not that it's a bad thing, but you have to create boundaries within yourself because your relationship with self is primary. Like if you're not or aligned with who you are, it's just not going to work out. But I was like laughing thinking about this because I remember being younger and being in situations where I've either in friend groups or in a professional setting. And your first instinct is to do everything like you said perfectly. Like you want to do it to the T, you want to follow your handbook, you want everyone to see or like your superiors to see like, "Oh, she's doing this right and it's book." And then somebody like very creative minded will like come along and do it the complete opposite way and get like a ton of praise. And I remember these situations happening and being like, "Oh, wait, like maybe just adhering to structure that I think is the perfect structure isn't like the one size fits all, isn't the right way to do it all the time. Like maybe I can be authentic and show more of my personality and still be praised and lauded for doing a great job, like this other person who just comes in and like throws the handbook to the
Yeah,
wind. And like, it's really, really interesting. So, I was just laughing thinking about that because, like, inevitably, like in life, there's always going to be somebody who does things quite
yeah,
differently or thinks quite differently from you, and they come in, you're like, it's like a like slap
yeah,
on the head reminder, like, oh, there's lots of different ways to be successful or lots of different pathways to get to the same
Yeah.
door or
Well,
whatever.
and I think that we can sometimes think that, like, to be brave, like, the bravest people are the ones that are individuals and independent, doing it on their own, and being a leader that way, that it's like, I actually think there's so much more bravery involved in, like, taking an alternative approach or, like, voicing a concern about something that you're not sure about or bringing in another person to help you, team up with you on something.
Yeah.
I think that that takes almost a lot more bravery because it's the risk of failure seems maybe higher than to someone that it's like, this is like the organized way I'm going to forge forth without involving anyone else, then it's all on me.
It's like striking that balance between like autonomy and
Yeah.
collaboration. It's like you want to be able to trust that you can figure things out and like maybe branch out and try and do things like when we started Bridget or started the podcast, it was like we learned how to do everything on our own, which was really great and very commendable. But then we also like hit a point where we had to be real and say, where do we want to outsource and bring on team members in order to like really grow and
Yeah,
flourish? Like collaboration is really key
totally.
to success in a lot of different situations. And then you have to remove your ego
Yes.
from it.
Well, and I think going back to that, like, relationship and boundaries with yourself, that takes a lot of self-awareness where it's like, "Okay, I can figure out how to do this and this and this. Like, we could save money doing this and doing everything ourselves, but what am I good at and fast at, and what am I just, like, not good at? And, like, what things do I need to learn like, I have a proclivity towards it, and I need to be doing, or what are some things that, like, I'm
Yeah.
not good at, and I it's not the highest and best use of my time or the best product
Yeah.
in the end for the company, by me doing it and cutting those
Mm.
things out,
And
like, that's
yeah.
okay.
And how do you like you can bring on people that really shine in those spaces too, and you can really celebrate having like a team member. And I think this is really important too, having people that you can cheer on in any type of relationship, whether it's your friends, your family, somebody that you hire, somebody that you're working with, like especially for women.
Yeah,
And I think a couple of our guests have actually talked about this. Like, is this like unspoken pressure of like you have to be cutthroat, you have to be successful, you have to like forge your own path and do it on your own. And I think like we're moving into a time and space now where we can afford to take a step back and be like, no, I'm going to lift like my peers up because their successes ultimately drive everything
yes.
forward, like myself
Yeah.
included, yourself included.
I mean, there was a question from our listeners about, like, creating, like, new friendships at work and reaching out to new people, whether it's a mentor or a peer or someone below or above you. I think that a going along with this idea of, like, lifting other people up is, like, well, instead of thinking about, like, "I'm going new friends to help me feel better here at work," I think when you show up, I think that it can actually be so much more productive and you can really form more connections by looking around you and being like, "Okay, like who am I relying on? Who is someone that's already helping me? How can I express appreciation for people?" Because I think that that sets a really strong foundation for new relationships at work where, and it doesn't take much, it's like reaching out to someone like, "Okay, I'm interacting with this person that works in operations or whatever every day." And just like when you hop on before you're giving them a task or working with them on something, being like, "You're really good at your job. And I just want you to know I so appreciate you being here, especially because I'm new. You're so helpful to me." 3 seconds of
Yeah.
appreciation, and suddenly you have a foundation that's like a friendship, a work friendship that might have its boundaries and limits, and it might be very, very professional, but expressing appreciation for people who are, helping you get comfortable in a job, or admiration, someone that you don't know yet
Yeah.
in work, but you really want to learn from or have mentor you or something, just being like, "Wow, I am so impressed by your career. I'm so interested in how you got from here to there. And I just want to tell you, I'm really grateful to be working here at your company. And if you have time for coffee anytime, I'd love to take you to coffee and ask you about a couple things." And it's just like expressing appreciation, admiration, anything really positive. People don't always get that in the workplace.
And gratitude and follow-up after
Yeah.
too. I mean, I think you told me before, like after an interview, you sent them a thank you card that was like had just a couple details on it about like what was really helpful for you, what you really enjoyed, and what you were looking forward to. And I just thought that that was brilliant because anytime you can have somebody that takes the time to just be that much more thoughtful, it speaks highly to their work ethic and what they're going to end up doing later on. I also this I wanted to add at this point, like both you and I have been employees and employers of people. And one of the things that I think there's one specific situation that comes to mind where listening and taking a moment to look at the people that you're working with, their qualities, and express that appreciation you said is so useful. I have had somebody that's worked for me before just say, like, I do check-ins with my employees, like, how are you feeling? Like, is what can I do to help kind of thing. But then also being ready for those answers and not having the ego involved in it. Cause every now and then I'll get somebody that's like, well, I really, am feeling like I need more positive feedback, like not just like the criticism. And I think that was really important for me to hear and important to remember because bringing myself back to being in that position where you're trying to please the people that you work for, of course, there's always going to be constructive criticism. On the other side, like you should have confidence in what you do, and the people that you work for should definitely say, like, doing great in these regards. Like A, B, and C are going really
Yeah.
well. Like there should always be
Yeah.
balance. And I think whether you're the employer or the employee, like it's fair to say that that's the case across the board.
Yeah. And I think that when you're expressing constructive criticism, I found when I got constructive criticism from people who phrased it in a way that was, I remember someone gave me some feedback, and instead of being like, "You need," like, they did say, like, "You're doing this, and this well, but you really need to work on this, like, you failed a couple times in this," where that could be just devastating for someone, you know?
Yeah.
But then it was paired with, "I'm giving you this feedback because I think you have incredible potential in this area, and if you master
Yeah.
these things, you're gonna be unstoppable." And I think that when someone tells you that, it's like, "Well, thank you for telling me that. I want to be unstoppable in that," and it's motivating, and it completely reframes how you can take some potentially really, like, hard feedback for someone to get, but it's like, "Oh, but faith in me, and that's why she's telling me these things, like, she wants me to be better. It's not that she's just pissed off that I'm not doing the right things," you know? Yeah, so these are just kinda like little scenarios from the workplace, but I think that work relationships are friendships, and they are complicated, and there can be some gray areas and stuff. One of the other, points that we had was about, like, how things at work can get a little, like, murky.
Hmm.
One point was about, like, working and, like, being in your workplace while something in your personal life is, like, blowing up, whether, like, you have a relationship, like, maybe you just gotten broken up with, or a family member is having some kinda hard time, or you're experiencing loss or grief. Keish, have you been in situations at work where you're like, "I wanna be anywhere but here, and I'm having a really hard time focusing," and how have you been able to kinda navigate that?
100%. And there are two different scenarios too. Things happen in life all the time. Two particular like tragedies in my family happen at two different junctions in life at two different jobs. And the first one was at a job that I ultimately ended up leaving. I mean, at the time, I really liked where I worked. I liked what I did. I liked the people that I worked with. But when this particular thing happened, I remember being very transparent, which takes a lot of practice, but I was able to sit down and say, "Hey, this happened. I had a family member pass away. It was very tragic. I need a little bit of time to take a step back, like, a day or two." And that was all fine, but then later on was met with like repercussions for taking time off, like change in attitude, a little bit of what we call lateral violence, where it's kind of like that passive aggressiveness from management or staff, like that makes you feel guilty for something you're entitled to. And then I also had a boss say, "How was your vacation?" Which felt really, really
Yeah,
insensitive at the time because it was not, very much not a vacation.
yeah.
So that's happened, and the best you can do is, one, you have to adhere to company policy. Like if something happens, like you don't necessarily have to tell everybody that you're working with.
I think in general, I've had a situation where I lost a very important family member, and I had a coworker, like, comment on the fact that I was working slower than usual and tell me that, she got that I lost someone, but I need to get it together, and to me, that was so counterproductive. I felt so unsafe in that situation, and I also, like, I regretted sharing the fact that I had that
Yeah.
loss with her because I was still processing it, and I felt very confused in that moment because I was like, then I was being self-critical, and I was like, "Get it together,"
Yeah.
and that didn't help with me processing my grief at all. So I think that it can be really hard when you're going through something super personal, but you also have to show up at work. But I think that looking back, I had shared that with a coworker who was kind of maybe slightly senior to me, but I'm really on the same team where I think that it would have maybe been more productive for me to go to someone a little bit more senior and share with
Yeah.
them what I was going through and just see like what my options were that way.
And I think too, and I think you're making a good point, and this kind of is like a good connection between my experience and your experience. Like at the time, these situations feel very like one, you're very vulnerable, you're experiencing something that, is difficult to explain or bring into the workplace. And I think we are taught to compartmentalize, like work is supposed to be work and home is supposed to be home. But if there's anything that the last 2 years has taught us, it's that life bleeds into itself in all different areas. And we're 1,000% entitled to have these experiences and cannot be expected to be robots. And so, to counteract some of these situations that might feel awkward, or, in your case, have somebody say something which frankly is inappropriate, like we have to remember that we as employees have rights in the workplace too.
Mhm.
Like you have a right to feel protected and safe and like an equal, like you have equal
Mhm.
opportunities. And so in those situations, I think it's really important to know exactly like this sounds very clinical, but like know your manual,
Yeah.
like know who your higher up is and, write these situations down. You have to like sometimes you have to write them down a couple of times to take like the emotion or the ego out of it. But if you can work on being like this is, the situation that occurred. This is what was said. Like, this made me feel very uncomfortable. You're entitled to have those feelings and share them with your HR or
Yeah.
share them with your manager so that you do begin to foster a more safe environment. And I think that that's something that everyone should just be like aware of. And
Well, and I also think that looking back at that experience, like I don't think I took a day off to just have a moment, and it was a very round the clock kind of job. So I think that retroactively I'm like it probably would have been better for me to actually just sit down and be like I need a day, to do something and have an outlet or spend time with a family member or by myself journaling or in nature or whatever I needed to do to really like let my grief take me for a minute. That would have been more productive than being like, no, I'm not going to even feel this. I'm going to go right back into work and then have it like actually be failing at my job. Because I think that employers also, it is hard to have an employee that has like problem after personal problem leaping into their life. Like I know this, I have a family member that has an employee that literally like every week there's something personal coming up. And it is like you as a person, you feel for them, but you're like, damn, my business is hurting from this, I think that if you actually give yourself some space and be like, "No, I need a break. I need a day." And maybe that'll help me come back and be able to be a little bit more present at work afterwards rather than trying to just shove it all under the rug. So, I think that kind of touches on some of our work relationships. I'm sure we'll get just more of these as we do more of these conversations. But we also wanted to talk more about complicated relationships within our families, but then also romantic relationships, because we get a lot of questions about first romantic relationships, navigating difficult parts of our relationships. So I think we're going to do a part two of these boundaries and healthy relationships and personal experiences and kind of takeaways on family and romantic relationships next.
which is super exciting because there's so much more to dive into. And I think we'll get more listener questions about this that we can directly address as well. But I think at the end of this episode, the end of the day, whether it's a friendship, a personal relationship, a romantic relationship, I really want to bring it back full circle to really leaning into that confidence and honing in on that confidence and that trust in yourself first, making sure that your relationship with yourself
Mhm.
first feels authentic and true, and that when there are shifts in that you're able to really think through those things, whether it's journaling or talking it out or just like getting right with yourself. I think one thing Asha and I can really agree on is that
Mhm.
cultivating that relationship with yourself and getting to know who you are, what your values are, what you want to provide to other people is a really great place to start with any relationship in life.
Yeah. Well, and I think that just that check-in of, like, after you have interaction with anyone, whether it's a professional interaction, a romantic interaction, a interaction, whatever it is, checking in with yourself and being like, "How did that make me feel?" oh, I felt challenged by this person, but in a good way. They made me think about something in a different way. Or I felt challenged in a way that really like made me feel icky. Or I sounded the way that I was interacting with them was, I was saying things in a way that doesn't feel like myself. Like just kind of observing how you are based on after interacting with other people can really tell you a lot about whether you need to redirect those relationships or set some boundaries or kind of like find out more about certain things, or if it's like, I think that is a relationship that I really need to invest much in. Maybe it's a relationship that's part of my life. Like you can't just be like, nope, I'm not going to interact with my boss, but like, or my toxic coworker. You can't always like completely draw boundaries like that with everybody. Some people are just in your life, but I think that having that self awareness of like, okay, like this relationship is one that's like an arm's length relationship, or this one is like, wow, that person really like, I've never thought about things that way. And I really want to know more. And I'd like to be that way. And knowing like this is a relationship I should really invest in and put some time into. So it's fun. I mean, so much of everything we believe in is our relationships and how communication and confidence builds and fosters those relationships. And this is just a fun episode to do. Obviously, I love talking with Kishia. She is one of
Yeah.
those friends that challenges me in ways that are really productive, that I admire so many things about her and how she lives and how she balances things in her life. She's a friend that I want to be more like. So conversations with someone like that
Oh,
in my
I
own life, and I
completely
hope that it
agree.
was, in some way helpful to our audience. So thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, we're excited to put together part 2 for you all, and we'll see you soon, same time next week.
Bye.
And that's our show. If you liked what you heard today, please like, subscribe to, follow, and share Meet Bridget with your circle. The best way to help our work here is to rate and review our podcast. We're listening and constantly working to build something helpful for you. Catch you next time.
Did you have an awesome time? Did you drink awesome shooters and listen to awesome music and then just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness?